Christine Grace, welcome back to my channel. Today is another reaction video. Like the video on your way in, let's get straight into it. So today's video was sent over to me from Duncan over in my WhatsApp community. Thank you so much, Duncan, for sending this one over. And the video is titled, "The Feminist Narrative is Crumbling. Here's Why." Let's find out.
In recent years, I have become thoroughly convinced that feminism has severely hurt our society. It's done so primarily by selling 5 pernicious lies to women. So let's talk about those lies and let's talk about what impact each lie has had on our society. And at the end, I want to talk about why feminism has been so successful in taking women ideologically hostage. Let's begin with lie number 1. Women can have sex just like men. This right here is the most dangerous lie that feminism has sold to millions of women. Feminism is always aiming for equality for women, and in many ways they have achieved that. They secured the right to vote, to have financial freedom, as well as the right to work. But as the battles have been won and equality has been achieved, the fervor for more equality has blinded them, where even inequalities that are biologically built in now need to be destroyed.
So no battle was won. I mean, if we go into the history books, and if you want to know more about this, you should go check out Rachel Wilson's book, Occult Feminism. This was never the case. In fact, that's the first lie. Feminism was not what we think. Feminism was never about equality. In fact, if we cared about women's opinions, if feminism was about doing what's best for women, they would have not allowed it to go as far as it did in the first place, because it's only about 5% of women that actually wanted the vote, that actually wanted to go out into the workplace. Most women had no desire for any of this. In fact, they quite strongly opposed it. And you can find various documentations of this. The women who were against feminism actually went out and debated these women often to express their disdain for the drive for feminism.
This inequality is most apparent when it comes to sex. Sex is not the same for men and women, and it never can be because of the risks attached for each gender. Pregnancy, assault, and even getting killed are all real possibilities because at the end of the day, men are just stronger and more aggressive. And it's really hard to tell whether a man is going to honor you and take care of you because he's a good man versus a man who's just pretending to be a good man in order to have access to you. Previous generations solved this issue by recognizing sex as something very sacred because it has the power to create life. So they treated a woman's body and trust as inviolate and relegated this union between man and woman to marriage. Why? Because marriage offered a whole bunch of security that a casual encounter just couldn't. There was safety in the contract of marriage. The man was legally bound to his wife as well as to his children and had the societal and financial responsibility for them. This gatekeeping of sex was really effective because it forced men to have to work for that privilege through marriage. They had to prove to be worthy of a woman, to be worthy of someone's daughter. They had to be financially responsible, have a good reputation in their society, and show a willingness to step up to those responsibilities. Now, of course, there were instances of just terrible men pretending to fit the bill, but overall, the system worked really well in protecting women, but more importantly,
Always going to be a bad apple.
Forcing men to grow up. Now, fast forward to today, where in our society, one of the biggest problems that we're facing is that men seem to be caught up in this perpetual arrested development. Even well into their 40s and 50s, there are these instances of adult toddlers, and cities like San Francisco and New York have turned into Neverland, where people really just don't have to grow up. The combination of dating apps as well as the proliferation of hookup culture has ended that noble act of men courting women and honestly turned sex into a commodity. They have reduced sex down to a meaningless act.
Yeah, that's because of women giving it away so freely. But also, you know, the infantization of men, I don't really think is as big of a problem as the infantization of women. I think women have become just like toddlers, like spoiled children who don't understand that relationships are about negotiation, who no longer view relationships as what can I give to this person, but rather what can I take? You know, we've almost over-mothered and over-parented women because of feminism to the point where we expect men to become adults and grow up, and yet we allow women to have these toddler-like tantrums and, you know, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me toddler attitudes. Because feminism has allowed that. Now, of course, there are men who never grow up. There are men who, don't grow into fatherhood. There are men who go around doing terrible things and think they can get away with it because they perhaps were, over-coddled as children. Of course, but it's like what I said previously, a bad apple doesn't make, a whole bad crate, if that's the saying, whatever it is. Unfortunately, I think there are far more instances of women behaving like children than there are men. Because of the nature of being a man, I think it requires more growing up. I think it requires more logical thought. And also, to get brutal about it, the majority of women can find someone to reproduce with. Throughout history, there's always been a fairly large percentage of men who never reproduce. So, if we're talking realistically here, how much does men behaving like children, as she's putting it, actually affect, the wider society and, the society in the future? Not that much, because likely those men have been the same for centuries, and it's the men who don't end up reproducing. Harsh, but a fact of reality. Whereas women, reproduce a lot more, right? It's not very hard for a woman to find someone. So if we are now setting the standard as we can behave like children, we can act like toddlers, and we're not going to give anything to the relationship, and of course men aren't going to value us anymore or court us anymore, because, or why would they? It's not worth it. No one likes dealing with a toddler having a tantrum, so why would men willingly take on a woman in that form?
Push to have sex like men was aimed to empower women, to help them claim their sexuality and throw off societal expectations. But has it actually helped women? Aimed at freeing women, the sexual revolution has actually freed men to use women, all while telling women to feel empowered by being disposable. Like I said, this is the most dangerous feminist lie. Unfortunately, it's not the only one. Lie number 2. Women had to fight for the right to vote, while men were just granted the right to vote. Yes, women had to fight for the right to vote, but so did men. Voting is a pretty novel concept. For centuries, societies have been organized around monarchies, where one person, either the king or the queen, had all the power, while the people surrounding them were trying to have checks on that power. In the West, voting was first introduced in the 13th century, where a small percentage of the population were eligible to vote depending on land ownership. The right was slowly expanded, but even as late as 1832, in England, less than 10% of the population were eligible to vote. In colonial America, voting was restricted to land-owning men only, because property ownership meant you paid taxes. So there was this belief that if you paid taxes, you had stake in the society.
I honestly don't see a problem with that. In fact, I've often expressed this view to people. I don't think that the majority of people should have the right to vote. I don't think I should have the right to vote. I mean, I pay taxes, but, I don't really own any land. I guess it's a tricky one, because I do occasionally use the National Health Service, but I try not to. Like, I actively avoid it because it's that bad. And, I think it makes... My thing is that, there are people voting about things that they have no idea about. And I'm very honest to say what I know nothing about. But a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are unable to say, hey, do you know what? I know nothing about this. It's like they feel a loss of power from saying that. And there are a lot of stupid people that will go around pretending that they're not stupid. And, you're around a very boring person when everything you have to say, they go, oh, yeah, I know that. I know that. I know that. Like, I always know someone's probably fairly intelligent when they can openly tell me, oh no, I didn't know that. Oh no, I've not heard of that. Can you explain it to me? Like, openness and the ability to ask questions is a sign of intelligence, not thinking you know everything. So yeah, I don't think that majority of people should be voting, because I don't think the majority of people should have a say on things that probably more in the know people should be voting on and considering.
Universal male suffrage did not exist until the late 1800s, where many men had to fight and die in wars before they were granted that right. So while women did secure the right to vote in the 1920s, it was only about 50 years after all men got the right to vote, around the 1870s, depending on when the states passed the laws. The idea that men just gave them...
I wonder why men's suffrage happened. We don't really hear that, do we? It's always about women's suffrage, but why did men's suffrage happen? Why did all men want the right to vote? Why were they not just happy with it being the landowners, this, that, and the other. Was that the early form of socialism? I don't know. Let me know what you think. Do you know anything? Tell me in the comments.
Themselves all the power is a feminist myth. Both men and women had to earn that right to vote because for most of history, people in power did not believe in distributing that power. This is not limited to America either. You can see that the timeline of universal suffrage is very similar across the world, meaning this was an evolution of trust in the people that all societies have had to go through. Lie number 3, women were locked up in the home by men.
I think it was a mistake and I have zero power. I think it was a mistake because if we look at those dates there and we look at, even just going from the men's suffrage, it seems like the world's just got worse. Obviously, it depends on the lens that you're looking at it through. If you're looking at it through, technology, connectivity, industrialization, things have got far better. But for human beings, in terms of relationships, families, populations, it just seems to be getting worse.
Until feminism freed them. This is the feminist
freed them.
Were locked up in the home by men until feminism freed them. This is the feminist myth that men had to lock women up in the home because they're afraid of feminine power. This is such a misunderstanding and disconnection from what the world used to be like because life was really hard, not just for women, for everyone. For much of history, women stayed in the home out of pure necessity. Before electricity, washing machines, or running water, housework wasn't just about doing chores, it was survival. Hauling buckets of water, scrubbing clothes, making bread from grain that you milled yourself, sewing every piece of clothing that your family wore. These were all tasks that were absolute paramount to the family's survival. Women were doing all of this all while raising children without any modern medicine. So without antibiotics, hospitals, or vaccines.
And obviously, people lost children as well. And they would have lots of children. So imagine you've got 9 children and one of them dies. That's horrible. Today, we would take a lot of time to grieve. You didn't have time for grieving back then. Life was hard. Life was really hard. But I still think that, I always forget who said this. Was it Viktor Frankl who said, as the struggle for survival subsides, a critical question emerges: survival for what? And I often hear this quote come to mind when watching people talk about the past and watching people talk about how hard it used to be. But I feel like it's in the pursuit of doing something hard that the meaning is found. These people, they had really hard lives, but I don't know, I wasn't there. But I just feel like they were closer. I feel like they were more in tune with themselves, more in tune with the world because they were trying to survive. And I say this obviously in a very privileged position of having a roof over my head and being in a warm room and, having all of this equipment and stuff and doing a very, very easy job. But I can guarantee you that, if it was harder, then we would probably all get along a bit better. We would have bigger families. We would be more present. We'd be more present in the moment because the struggle of survival forces you to be in the present. Now, of course, some of us would be dead, obviously, because of the diseases and this, that, and the other. So it's finding that silver lining of not detaching ourselves from reality so much in comfort to the point where we have no meaning in our lives, but being grateful for the comfort and living in a comfortable world, but perhaps imposing our own struggles upon ourselves every now and then to remind us what's important. Or, not running from struggle that arises in our lives, embracing the struggle as it comes, knowing that it's through that struggle that you get closest to what matters. And this has been known for millennia. This is not new information. This isn't just me saying this. I mean, this is in practically every religion in the world. In the Bible, I'm not sure who says it, but the verse is, God is made strongest when I'm at my weakest. I know that the same thing appears in the Vedas. I know that the same thing appears in Buddhism. I know that the same thing appears in Taoism, in Sikhism. The only one I'm not sure about is Islam, but I'm sure someone in the comments could correct that for me. if it is there. But it seems fairly intuitive to me. You know, it is when we are at our lowest and we are struggling the absolute most that unless we give up, we find the true meaning of things. Now, that's not me telling you guys to go out and suffer every single damn day, but it is saying that there is a level of it that you can and are strong enough to endure that you should endure. Because then you're so much more grateful for the comfort. And I think that's what we've forgotten. I think that's what feminism has set out to do. It's set out to provide everyone with so much comfort so that no one ever has to suffer. And that's what it is. It's women running society who care all about their feelings, which really just means I want to be comfortable and happy all the time, and I never want to struggle. And then we wonder why these women are turning 30, 40, 50, 60, either divorcing or having never been married and wondering, I've got everything going for me. I've got money, I've got a house, I've got all these beautiful things, I've got cats, but yet I don't have any meaning in my life. I'm lonely. Well, it's because you've probably never had a real struggle. You've never opened yourself up to the vulnerability of a relationship to welcome struggle into your life, emotional struggle at least, to be able to overcome that and reap the benefits of doing that.
To the family survival. Women were doing all of this all while raising children without any modern medicine. So without antibiotics, hospitals, or vaccines. Meanwhile, it's not like the men were off to some cushy job in the boardroom. Instead, they were breaking their backs in the fields, in mines, in factories, just dealing with horrid working conditions. Or, let's be honest, dying in wars to protect their families as well as their nation. Everyone was fighting to survive. And then capitalism changed everything. The division of labor, which is one of the primary principles of capitalism, meant that people could now specialize, trade, and buy what they once had to make for themselves. This freed people up from survival work, and that freedom sparked the inventions that have built the world that we live in today. We are surrounded by these inventions. 200 years ago, I would have had to spend all my time churning butter, sewing clothes, making candles. Now, I just buy them. It would have taken me 2 days to do my laundry. Now I just press a button. And that time that was spent behind survival work can now be turned into more productive work, more specialized work. The same has been true for men as well. Machines,
I don't know if I'd say more productive. I think that work was absolutely productive for the time.
Have taken over all of that back-breaking work. So infrastructure work and building things has become so much easier, and people are now free to build, to think, and to create in ways that our forebears never could. Women have had biological limitations that have also kept them in the home. And you know what? Capitalism solved that too. In 1888, the first sanitary pad was created, which made it far easier for women to leave the house during their periods without the discomfort and the worry. So women were limited in the home because of survival, because of biology, but have been liberated by human ingenuity, by our forebears conquering nature and building a safer society. We women were freed by civilization itself. Lie number 4, marriage is slavery and children are a burden, and the only way that we could reach our highest potential was through our work. This cultural push has unfortunately created an epidemic of loneliness, nihilism, but worst of all, it has turned men and women into enemies. Those very same feminists now argue for government-paid maternity leave, subsidized childcare, and many other safety nets to improve the lives of women. But before feminism, a woman didn't need to turn to the government for help. Instead, she turned to her husband, to her family, to her community. Marriage is not this predatory institution where men get a servant for life. Instead, it has always been a contract between the sexes to team up and brave the challenging world. Men were the protectors who went out into the harsh world for resources, and women created the safety and comfort of the home where the man could retreat and they could raise children together. That was always the purpose of marriage, stability through partnership. It's on the bedrock of this partnership that every community is formed and every nation has stood. This is why these calls for the government to solve so many social problems has become so loud. It's because right now in our nation, our sense of community is so weak, and that's because our families are so weak, and that's because our marriages are so weak. As of 2024, only 47% of households are headed up by a married couple, which is down from 79% in 1949. And 1 in 4 Americans, that's 91 million people, live alone. No wonder mental health, self-harm, and substance abuse are on the rise. Human beings were not meant to be alone. We were meant to live in families, to be part of communities, to find meaning through responsibility to others. And paternity support for women wasn't wasn't supposed to be funded by the government. No, instead, men were called upon to step up and provide for their families, since fatherhood was considered just as sacred a duty as motherhood. But feminism believes that dependence is oppression, obligation is oppression, responsibility is oppression, that what the individual, particularly a woman, is entitled to is a life that is completely unhooked from others, with no one to answer to, with no one to care for, and no one who truly needs her. Meanwhile, all of her needs should be met by a non-judgmental government. But that is not liberation. It's actually slow spiritual decay. There is this momentary pleasure.
I love that. Slow spiritual decay. That is absolutely it.
Of knowing that you have no responsibilities. But that pleasure comes at the price of purpose. And all that's left at the end of all of that pleasure is loneliness. There are plenty of imperfections in marriage, and that's expected because people themselves are imperfect. But when it's done correctly, when the two people are oriented correctly, marriage gives people a life of purpose, stability, and love. And children offer this path of rebirth, continuity, and meaning. I'm not saying that women shouldn't work. If that's what calls to you, absolutely you should. All I'm saying is that you should not sacrifice your family life at the altar of your career. Because the truth is that meaning comes from being needed, from forming bonds, from creating family and community. And none of that is possible without self-sacrifice. And also sacrificing your independence. But in exchange for that price, you get the opportunity to build something so much bigger than yourself. And that is the true power of marriage. Lie number 5. Sex work is empowering for women.
This one is just the most absurd one that I question if even women who do sex work believe it.
Feminism believes that if women are unhappy, it's society's fault.
I think if you believe, man or woman, that sex work is empowering, you're either just lying to yourself or you're genuinely stupid.
In this case, if women are unhappy participating in sex work, whether that's through prostitution or making explicit content, the problem isn't the act itself. The problem is that society unfairly looks down on it. To correct this, there have been many campaigns to argue that sex work is real work, and women should be applauded for making content on OF because they are owning their sexuality. Just like the rest of the feminist lies that we've been told, the intention is to help women, but does it really? The adult industry doesn't actually empower women, and it never has.
What? Nah, I never knew that.
Has only ever existed to exploit them for money. There are endless stories of young women getting lured into creating this type of content with false promises of fame and money, only to be locked into predatory cycles where consent is extremely blurred, filming conditions are absolutely horrid, and worst of all, their bodies get turned into a commodity that they no longer own. While women are more in control on platforms like OF, they really join a platform like that convinced by these stories of the top 1% where women are making millions of dollars, only to find themselves crossing their own personal boundaries to make pennies. All for what? The industry codifies women. It has turned their bodies into products, and it trains men to see intimacy as something that can be purchased. And engaging in this kind of transaction, both for men and for women, robs them of any self-respect, because once something sacred can be bought, it stops being sacred, and no amount of cultural acceptance can actually change that. Loud declarations that sex work is empowering might drown out your inner voice that hates being something that can be purchased. But it won't ever fix that instinctive shame that comes from knowing that your self-worth has been reduced to a price. In order for a person to respect themselves, some things have to be above money, like our integrity, like our convictions, but above all, our body. And that's why a person for sale, no matter how much money they make, eventually feels worthless. So why has this feminist ideology taken such a hold? Just the single issue of abortion proves that women are possessed by this ideology. Abortion has turned women into single issue voters because many of them believe that a child isn't a gift, it's a curse. And that is part of the clue there. Ideologies that sell victim narratives take a hold in people because they want to see themselves as a victim. And a victim is someone that a society should aim to protect, but also look at them as justified in whatever action that they want to take as recompense for those slights.
Nothing worse than a victim. Oh my goodness. I can't stand people who have a victim complex. I absolutely can't stand it. If you're someone who understands that your suffering is what's made you, you're a great person. You're an absolutely great person. But if you're someone who goes around and has to justify their behavior because of something that happened to you, like, quite frankly, I don't care what happened to you. I don't care how bad it was. If you use it as a reason to cause more pain and suffering onto other people who did nothing to you, you're an awful person. And I know that's quite a controversial take, like, oh, you're victim shaming. I don't care. I don't care. Because the truth is that, you know, it's that saying, hurt people hurt people. Now, this isn't me telling you to have, you know, sympathy or empathy for, you know, villains. Not at all. Get those people gone out of your life. But if you then allow what they did to you to turn you into something nasty, you've let them win. You've let them win. They have succeeded in destroying you. Because everyone has the potential for kindness. Like, it costs nothing to be kind. And if you turn into something ugly because of an ugly thing someone did to you, you're still ugly.
All of this really translates to getting a blank check to do whatever the hell you would like. And
I mean, I react to so many women on this channel, and often these women are bitter. And no doubt they've been hurt, but that doesn't excuse the bitterness.
Never needing to explain yourself or own up to your own mistakes, because it's always society's fault. It's always men's fault. That is the relationship with the self and with the reality that feminism is peddling. And honestly, that sounds so good to people. No personal responsibility, an external excuse for everything wrong in my life, and I can do whatever the hell I want and never have.
Do you know what's so confusing to me that I've never got? I never understand how that sounds good to people. Because to my ears, I hear that. I hear no responsibility, no accountability. I can do whatever I want and I can blame other people for it. That sounds like hell. Because that just means that I have zero control. That means everything that happens to me is outside of my control. So if I'm having, you know, if I'm not enjoying where my life is going, there's nothing I can do about it because it's not my fault. I have no accountability. I have no responsibilities. Like, that's awful. That's absolutely awful. You know, whereas, okay, I take accountability for my actions. That means not blaming anyone else for my shortfalls, accepting the bad things that have happened to me, even the things that were outside of my control, taking full responsibility for everything, how I got myself in any position anywhere in my life. Yeah, that's a lot. But you know what? I have something now. I'm in control. I'm accountable. It's down to me. So I can choose to do whatever I want. Within reason, obviously, but I can choose my life. That's great. That opens up the realm of possibilities. Now life is no longer just beating me down. I'm standing up and creating life for myself. Like, that's great. So I've never got people who like the idea of, you know, blaming someone else for their problems. Because in my mind, I'm like, you're just giving them all the power. That means you have no power over your life. If it's always someone else's fault, then you have no control. You can't do anything great.
To own up to any of the consequences? Sign me up. This is why when you try to argue with the specifics of feminist ideology, the true believers won't be willing to change their mind. Because underneath it all they want to do is see themselves as victims. They're locked in.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. And she put it so gracefully. She's really articulated the points really well here. Go check her out. Her name is Baggage Claim. She's doing really well. And this video is called The Feminist Narrative is Crumbling. Here's why. I really like what she had to say. There's nothing there that I don't think, you know, that I think she missed out. I think she hit all of the main points pretty well. Thank you, Duncan, for sending over this video. It was definitely a good one. Definitely got me thinking about things. What do you guys think? I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up on your way out. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to keep up to date with all of my content. If you have a video for me to react to, why not consider joining the WhatsApp community, or you can send me over an email. And if you'd like to consider donating to the channel to support my work, you can do that by clicking the link in the description below. As always, thank you so much for being here. I'll see you very soon in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.